Bruchem Aborim B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Yirgin Shir Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's share from Rabbi Yakov Mishlit on Dine Kvoida Sukkah K'dushasa. What shouldn't be done in the Sukkah. I've discussed this banter share. Call Yirgin Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or 718-853-3950 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
Today's a day of Hayom Katz Malach Meruba. So much to do, but I wanted to at least focus on the basic mitzvah of Yeshiva Sukkah, primarily what should and what shouldn't be done in the Sukkah. And as we'll see, there are many shilas, but I think the common denominator of all the shilas is the fact that, as we'll see, it's not just a question of it's not appropriate, it's not proper for the Sukkah. This is a sugya that really it brings us to the very tzuras ha-mitzvah, the actual mitzvah itself of Yeshiva Sukkah. And let me explain. The Mishnah in Sukkah Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis says the Chiyav Kol Shivas Hayomim Adam Ois Sukkasai Kva Ubeisi Aroi. Basically, you have to make the Sukkah your diras Kva, which of course sounds great, but the obvious question is, the Sukkah is not my Kva. I live 53 weeks of the year, I live in my house, and especially the old-time Sukkahs were very much makeshift, Aroi. What does it mean to make the Sukkah diras Kva? But the question runs a little deeper, because the Gemara at the beginning of Sukkah Daf Beis, darshaning the pasuk Basukkahs Teishu Shivas Yamim, Kol Shivas Yamim Tzei Midiras Kva V'Shei B'Diras Aroi. The Gemara calls the Sukkah Aroi, and here the Gemara says to make the Sukkah Kva. But what's more interesting, Rabbeinu Tam Shita in Sukkah Daf Beis, that you're not allowed to make the Sukkah Kva. If you put too much schacha on the Sukkah and the rain doesn't penetrate, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you're not yoitza. In fact, I'll tell you something even more fascinating. There's a shita of the Chumas Hadeshin and Simon Tzadik Beis. There are more in Tov Reish Mem. Siv Dalet quotes this. A sukkah theoretically is kosher of zayin al zayin if it's 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, approximately 28 inches. And the question is obvious. If you have a gross yid, a tall person, 6.5 feet tall, how is he supposed to sleep in a sukkah 28 inches? So the Chumas Hadeshin says, Ramah quotes it, you'll cuddle up, you'll fit in. Pliya. How could you be chayiv in a sukkah 28 inches? You can't sleep. Isn't that mitzdayer? Says Abstein Bezalman in Alicha Shleim and Perek Tes Oralam Medalid. If you make a sukkah the way the Torah allows you to make a sukkah, then that's the sukkah, and you have to make an eitzah. If the Torah wants a diras aroi, zayin al zayin is kosher, you yaitza in that sukkah and you're not mitzdayer. So we seem to be getting mixed messages. What is the sukkah? Is it aroi or kva? So the simple answer, which is the yesod of today, is the Gemara. Because on this mishnah, you have to make the sukkah kva, the Gemara asks the question, Keitzad. What does that mean, halacha l'maisa? How do you make a sukkah aroi into kva? Hoyolei kelim noyim, mile in the sukkah. You have nice dishes, bring them to the sukkah. Matzah is nice, you have nice bedspreads, bring them to the sukkah. The Rekeach in the mitzvah of sukkah adds a few examples: a nice bed, a nice table, a nice chair, a nice lighting system, I guess in our times. But you have to bring the nicest things to the sukkah. Then the Gemara explains, oichel v'shoisa u'metayel b'sukkah. You eat and drink, and you relax in the sukkah. Of course, tayel does not mean going for a walk. You can't walk in this tiny sukkah. It means to relax, menuchas hanefesh. We'll soon see what else it means. But basically, this is the tzuras ha-mitzvah. In other words, to put it very simply, the sukkah is not your permanent dwelling. You have a nice house. But the mitzvah is to make the sukkah for 7 days your permanent dwelling. Make it, treat it like your house, like the Baruch would say, make a matzav out of it, the nice dishes, the nice this, the nice that. But don't keep it a matzav aroi for 7 days. Live in the sukkah on a permanent basis. So of course it's not your house, but that's the mitzvah to make it into your house. Rashi puts it beautifully. Liyos kol ikdirasoi bo. In other words, I guess you could say, it's a tvei dinim. In the appearance of the sukkah and the gashmias, make it as comfortable as possible. Good lighting, good table, good chairs, nice bread spreads. But more importantly, be there. Live there for the 7 days. So it's a din on the sukkah and a din on the person. To quote the Ramah and Darkei Moshe, the beginning of Tov Reish Lamed Tes, who's based on a maril, Klal the milsa la'olam yidma alav sukkasai ki'ilu hu beisai. Of course, it's not your house, but make the sukkah your house for the 7 days. And of course, a lot of hashkafa also, that a person thinks he's on this world and this is his permanent dwelling, realize the mitzvahs and the ma'asim tovim are the ikka. But this is the basic yisoid of sukkah being a diras kva for the 7 days. Make it comfortable and be there for the 7 days. Where does this chiyuv come from? Zoktigim frektima menani mili, the Tana Rabbanan, the pasuk is Sukkah's Teshvu Shivas Yamim, Teshvu Chazal Darshan Ka'in Taduru. Mikan Amru Kol Zayim Yamim Oisa Adam Sukkasei Kva Ubeisei Aroi. This is the well-known yisoid of Teshvu Ka'in Taduru. The Bavli is Bayas, the Yishalmi, and the Perek Beis and Sukkah. This is the Tzuras HaMitzvah of Sukkah. Make the sukkah like your house. I'm sure you remember many halachos that are based on Ka'in Taduru. There's a P'tur of Hol Chederach, a traveler, Shomer Ginus Upradesim, Mitztayer, when it rains, you potter al Ka'in Taduru. Achilas Aroi, a snack is mutter out of the sukkah. Learning Be'in will soon see is mutter out of the sukkah. All these halachos are based on Teshvu Ka'in Taduru. You occasionally snack out of your house, you could snack out of the sukkah. In other words, as we know, that's the tzuras ha-mitzvah of sukkah. Our Gemara, or our sukkah for today, is adding a new Ka'in Taduru. And that is, make the sukkah user-friendly and comfortable, make it your bias, so you'll end up living in the sukkah for the 7 days. In other words, and I want to be very clear, I think this is very important halacha, there's a general mitzvah of zekeli v'anveyu, beautify a mitzvah. But by sukkah, it's more than just the general zekeli v'anveyu, that's the tzuras ha-mitzvah. Teishu Ka'in Taduru requires us to make the sukkah comfortable. Matzah is nice, and mita noi. And I'll give you one mashal for now. The Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Yud, it's Gepaskin and Tov Reish Chav Tes, Sif Yud Tes, that if a person has a beautiful noi sukkah, so halacha, lamaisa, he could take it and put it right under the schach. He has a beautiful design, a nice cloth. As long as within 4 tvachim of the schach, he could put the noi sukkah on the entire length of the schach. If the noi sukkah is to beautify the sukkah, it could cover all the schach and your yaitza. And the Rashba in Chelik Aleph and the Tshuva Simanun Hey wonders what shat. Zok the Rashba, because the ikka mitzvah of sukkah is sukkah's teishu Ka'in Taduru like Chazal Darshan. And in your house, you beautify the house. The same thing do in the sukkah terav alav dirasai, lisnoyos, lahanim alav yeshiva sukkah. He uses many lashonis, lechaber es mitzvah. So the Rashba is saying the whole purpose of noi sukkah is an expression of teishu Ka'in Taduru. And it's so much part of the sukkah that even if it covers the schach, it doesn't make a difference. As long as it's close enough to the schach, to the schach, that's part of the sukkah. Now, as the Rashba is saying, the pshat in noi sukkah that we make such a big deal about is another expression of teishu Ka'in Taduru. I saw in the Chuvas Merivayo in Simon Kuf Tzadik Aleph, he writes mitzvah and oisi. It's a mitzvah to add noi sukkah. Dichsiv teishu Ka'in Taduru. So frag the B'Yosef Engel B'Yoni Ashas and Sukkah Daf Yud Tzarachian. I thought the chiyuv of Hiddur mitzvah is a keli v'anveyu, and he asked that on the Merivayo. But as we said, it's not a kasha. It's more than the regular zekeli v'anveyu. This is the guf ha-mitzvah of sukkah. The guf ha-mitzvah of sukkah is teishu Ka'in Taduru. And one of the expressions is the mitzvah of noi sukkah. And the truth is that it reads beautifully in Lashon HaGemara. Hoyelei kelim noyim, matzois noyim, bring it to the sukkah. Minani mili, the Tana Rabbanan teishu gain teduru. What the Gemara is telling us that this mitzvah of making the sukkah user-friendly, making it nice, making it comfortable, is part of the mitzvah of teishu ka'in teduru. Now that we have that, let's try to apply this lemais, and I hope everything should be simple once we have that yesod. First of all, first and foremost, make the sukkah comfortable. You know, there's an old mentality. If you have an old rickety table that whenever you touch it, it shakes, oh, it's perfect with the sukkah. Bring it out to the sukkah. If it rains, it doesn't get ruined. A rickety table is not perfect with sukkahs. Maybe for tishbu of zeichel l'chorban. But you sit on the sukkah and every time you touch the table, it shakes. You're not going to stay there for too long. Go to the hardware store, get an outdoor table, doesn't get ruined in the rain. I'm not saying you have to bring out your dining room table, but get a table that you enjoy being there. Get a chair that doesn't shake, not an old zeichel l'chorban chair. Again, you don't have to have dining room quality, but it should be comfortable. You know, these people still have the old-fashioned light bulb, the incandescent bulb, one bulb for the whole big sukkah. You know, there are so many alternatives to have safe, good lighting that you enjoy learning in the sukkah. If you have an old light that barely gives off light, you're not going to stay too long. But this is not just Eitzah Toiva, Hidda Mitzvah. This is the Gemara. This is the Pasuk. Teishu, Chazal Darshan, Ka'in Teduru. Certainly you should make sure that the lighting is attached securely. When you have children or anything running around, it happens they pull out the light from the socket, and then the whole sukkah is your Makayim, Ki Yeshev Achoyshech Hashem Orli. So make sure it's secure and it's above the children's reach. But make the sukkah a comfortable place to be. Of course, a comfortable bed is a good idea. You know, people have these mattresses that mamacha you can't fall asleep on, and the kids say, I can't sleep. Of course you can't sleep. I'm not saying to get, again, a bedroom set, but there are very good options to make the sleeping comfortable. In some years, not this year, but some years that sukkah falls out in mid-October. It's almost winter weather. So people have the mentality, okay, let's go, we'll brave it, we'll be ma'aser nefesh, we'll go to the sukkah, we'll eat quickly. Zok Chafetz Chaim and Bi'alacha Tov Reish Mem, Siv Dal, that's wrong. If you're braving it and hurrying up and you're not enjoying the sukkah, you might be mitztayeh patim in a sukkah. The eitzah is, take out a sweater, put on a coat. The Chafetz Chaim in Sivkot Lamed Aleph says, try to keep the food warm. In fact, Rav Sternbuch in Chelik Daled on B'Tov Mem Vav quotes both Reb Chaim Briska and the Chafetz Chaim that when in European sukkahs it was often cold, they would install a heating system. If it was not electrical, they put in a tanur, keep the sukkah comfortable. Okay, the emes is, I can't tell you to go put in a fireplace in the sukkah, but today there are safe heaters that are really safe, and you can keep them on, there's no concern, there's no chashash of a fire. That's part of ka'in teduru, and I know people. In the nusach we say before the yeshiva sukkah, we want the yeshiva sukkah to be like a gullus, mechaperes, but there's no mitzvah to have a sukkah like Siberia, it's freezing cold. Make it as comfortable as possible. This year is vaker. This year it's very early in the year. It might be a hot sukkah, so there are alternatives. There's a fan that's still pretty good. Some people put in air conditioning, tavei leim bracha, a real ka'in teduru. But it's not just to ignore and make the sukkah quick in and out. Make the sukkah possible. Make the sukkah comfortable. It used to be a mitzvah to tell the rabbim, try to run a phone line into the sukkah. I remember Yakov Kamenetsky had a phone in the sukkah, all sukkahs, but today with cell phones, this is no longer relevant. But the attitude is, make the sukkah the place to be for the 7 days. A challenging question is it proper to use disposable dishes in the sukkah? In other words, typically Shabbos and Yom Tov you have china, nice dishes, but sukkahs it's a big hassle, it's difficult. It's often they get broken on the way from the house to the sukkah. So can you use disposable dishes instead of the typical Shabbos plates that you use? So Pashit, this is Mamash our Gemara. Kelim noyim, bring them to the sukkah. And indeed many are makbid, that they have the dish they use the whole year, they use in the sukkah. And avada, that's the best to do. But you have to use seichel. When you have a big family and it's difficult enough for the bnei abayis to manage as it is. So, the question is it a chumrah yenes cheshbon? Especially those that even on a regular Shabbos and Yom Tov they would use disposable. So for them it's ka'in taduru. But even those that are makbid, but again, ain't done in efshe, mishi'i efshe, it's easy for me to say, use yeshayna, but you have to use seichel, that's the derech eretz kodmal atayr. I saw Rabbi Yankel Fisher in the Chuvas and Chelik Tessim and Lamed, someone asked him, on Shabbos, maybe it's wrong to use disposable dishes because it's not covered Shabbos. So he writes back, covered Shabbos is a good kugel. Not plates. It's hard enough for the Bnei Bayis to juggle the multiple responsibilities they have. Don't make it harder. They're going to, snap from all the pressure. So avada, that's the Torah de Keseichel. In theory, of course, it's better to use china, and if you could do it, Tavei lo bracha, but there are other cheshbonis also, and basically use seichel and live al pi Torah. Just to show you what ka'in taduru is, the El Yerabban Sif Katan Aleph and the Chayodim and Kuf Mem Zayim Beis quote from earlier sources, from the Kadmoinim, that there was a minig dafka not to cover the tables with tablecloths in the house. Only cover tables in the sukkah. So the Chayodim, to show dramatically that I don't live in this house on sukkahs. I live in my sukkah, not in the house. Now the Yosef Oimitz and Tafsaf Reish Chav Zayin, the Pri Megadim, Mat Ephraim, Koryankov all say today the minig is not like that, because Lamaisa, people do cover all tables in the house the whole year, even if you don't use it. And especially the women do spend time in the house. So the minig is we do cover the tables in the house and in the sukkah, but the fact that there's such a minig to show dramatically that I'm living in the sukkah shows us that how important the ka'in taduru really is. Now let's move to the next word of the Gemara, kamat. The Gemara says you're supposed to eat and drink and learn in the sukkah. Freg the Gemara eini, Rava said that you're supposed to learn out of the sukkah. Zok the Gemara like kasha. Habe migris, habe yuni. Basically, to make a long story short, like the Magen Avram writes, Hakol lefi ha'inyan im yesh le menucha b'sukkah loimid b'sukkah. Ideally, a person should live in the sukkah. No, for us, what's living? Kihem chayenu. Torah is living. So if you live in the sukkah, you learn the sukkah. That's ideal. And as the Mechaber says, Kol shivas hayamim, you eat and learn in the sukkah. Ideally, a person should always learn in the sukkah. But if he will not learn when he's in the sukkah, either because it's a lot of noise, it's distraction, the Einikoch are playing there, the children are playing there, or some people, they very much learn only in Beis Medrash, because they learn alone. After 5 minutes, they are ligging in learning, if you know what I mean, with the emphasis on the ligging part, so they can't learn at home. So that's ka'in taduru, go to Beis Medrash. So basically, the Gemara's lashon is be'iyun, that you need concentration, which you don't have in a sukkah because there's so much going on. Go to Beis Medrash. If you're learning just superficially, if you're being ma'abasedra, l'mashal, or you're chazering, but it's lav dafka, Ian versus Bekiyas. Some say Ian is more of a chiyuv, because that's like an achilas kva. Some Rishonim say that. So I don't think the criterion is that dafka Ian versus Bekiyas. The criterion is, will you be learning, or if you'll be distracted, as Rashi says, that's a form of mitzvah. You can't learn because you're being distracted. The Seid HaYoim, one of the Kadmoinim, writes, if you can't learn well in the sukkah, it's us to learn the sukkah. It's called bittul Torah. So it's a question of a situation. It could be depending on every particular day. A quiet day, learn gesundheit. Now, what I would make a point is, Chacham Eina B'Rosh, at least make it comfortable to learn in the sukkah. Again, a good table, a good chair, a good lighting. If the lighting is poor and it's dim lighting, so you can't learn the sukkah, you're not going to be attracted. Make it as comfortable as possible, and then decide if it's conducive now for learning properly. What I will say, a tricky question is, let's say a person has a quiet sukkah and he's comfortable. The problem is he's a big goyin, and he takes out 15, 20 svarim every day with different marmakaimis, and it's pashut a big tircha to schlep the svarim to the sukkah and back afterwards. Maybe that's called mitztayer because he needs so many svarim. He has to run into the house occasionally to get them. So the emes is that's not mitztayer. To be halacha in the end of Tov Reish Lametes, but it's a much earlier side. Mitztayer means if the sukkah is uncomfortable, if it's raining, if there's a swarming with bugs. But here the sukkah is comfortable. What then? It's difficult For me, it's a tircha to bring the svarim. Oh, tircha? That's a virtue. That's a mile in the mitzvah. Tircha lefum tzara agra. Tircha is a plus. The halacha makes the yisoid, if you mitzvah from the yeshiva sukkah yapata. If it's a tircha to get there, that's part of the mitzvah. I was born in Williamsburg. I still remember the projects, the apartment buildings, the Heilige Yidden on the 15th story would take the hot coffee from their apartment and go down to the community sukkah on the ground floor. By the time it came down, the coffee was frozen. But mamash, they had such a simcha. That's not mitzvah. That's living it up. So the aside is, mitzvah means from the sukkah causes sar. The fact that you have to schlep the svarim is not a p'tur. But the Chiddush of the Magen Avram, Tzifkat and Yud Gimel, the Rabbi, the Rav, and Taduru quoted, that maybe that's a Torah Rav, that might be considered mitzvah. Now, it's hard to understand, Takadar HaShulchan, and see if your test does not understand. He said, what kind of p'tur is that? Tircha is not a p'tur. So the HaShulchan says, if you know you could learn, then indeed go the extra mile, bring the svarim down, bring it back. So I think we could say what the Bekur Yankiv says in Sifkat and Chaf Hey, a person should use Seichel, Chacham Lev, Yikach Mitzvahs, and try to make learning in the Sukkah work. Do what you can. Bring svarim, maybe to bring out a plastic box, you can keep the svarim in the box so it won't get ruined by the rain. Now, of course, you have to use Seichel. When things get ruined by the rain once, you get it all turned off. So make sure that it's protected from the rain. Some people buy waterproof boxes, they keep the svarim in them. Whatever, people know what to do when they're thinking. But the ikka is try to make learning in the sukkah work. Again, ma'ava sedra or chazora, if it's easy, that could be done in the sukkah. The Rav says, like I told you earlier, if someone always learns in the Beis Medrash, he's allowed to learn in the Beis Medrash and sukkahs also. So basically, try to make it work. But if it comes at the expense of bittul Torah, then go learn where it's best for your learning. What's noteworthy, the Gemara gives an example of oichel and shoisa. Frag the Sharatzin in Sivkot and Chavtes, today's is Tarfeish Lambetes, Sivkot and Chavtes. What do you mean? Shtia is always potter from Sukkah. Shtia is always Aroy, and you're allowed to drink out of the Sukkah. Zok the Sharatzin, the pshat must be that if you take a cup of coffee, that's mutter out of the Sukkah. But if you have a drink as part of a Suda, so even though the drink itself is not chayiv in the Sukkah, but the fact that it's part of the Sukkah, it's mechayiv a Sukkah. So the Ashtiya is part of the Suda, the Achila. In fact, Zok to be Allah, Oy Bazoi, maybe even Mayim as part of the Suda is chayiv in the Sukkah. Some Poiskim, I saw the Mikroy Kodesh in Aleph Lamed Aleph, takes this a step further. Let's say a person is makbedi, he's eating in the sukkah, everything. But he goes into the house to help serve and bringing out the cholent, and he wants to make a quick tayameh in the house to taste the cholent. So that might be awesome. Because even though he's taken just a potato, which is mutter chutz sukkah, but since it's part of a suda, then I might also be chayiv. In other words, the achilas aroy is when that's the extent of it. If it's part of a big suda, he has that tzad, maybe a chayiv. But one thing I will say that we see that the sukkah, the mitzvah of ka'in teduru, is both in the person's attitude and making the sukkah most comfortable. The next part is a little more challenging, and that's the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Lamed. What shouldn't be done in the sukkah? Till now we spoke what you should do, what shouldn't be done in the sukkah. So the Gemara makes the following statement. Mani mishtaya, that Rashi teaches koises cups, b'metalalta. Cups belong in the sukkah. Mani, why? Zok Rashi, she'ena ma'usim. There's nothing offensive about empty cups in the sukkah. But mani michla, Rashi says, ka'oreis la'achu she'achlu behem, plates after they were used, bami metalal, to take them out of the sukkah. In other words, cups after they're used are fine. But dirty plates after use must be removed from the sukkah. Now, Rashi does not spell out what's wrong with a plate that's used. But from the fact that Rashi said that cups are mutter because it's not mius, Taisa says, so Rashi holds that used plates are also because it's mius. In other words, now we start to hear a new factor in Hilchas Sukkah. You can't do something that's mo'os in the Sukkah. Now, the emes is, bizui mitzvah is a concept that we're familiar with. Shabbos, Daf Chav Beis, the Gemara learns from a pasuk that you can't do a mitzvah b'derech bezoyin, Shagisari and Siman Mem, Chayodim and Samachez Dalet feel that maybe bezoyin and mitzvah is an issa deraisa. It's based on a pasuk regarding Kisi Adam. Whatever the case is, there's no doubt about it that a bezoyin of a sukkah is asa midin Gemara, our Gemara. You'll wonder, what's the big deal? It's only walls. The answer is chas v'shalom. It's not only walls. The Gemara in Sukkah Daf Tes, that the walls of the sukkah are kodesh. There's a kedusha that's chal on the walls of the sukkah, and it's asa bana for the days of sukkahs. I mean, it's not a kleinikite. The Ushpizin come to our sukkah, and Sook is gematria 91, which is exactly the gematria of Shemus Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and Adnus, exactly 91. There's a lot to say, but one story will suffice. This story grad is printed in the Chsamsoi Fesidim. He once had two brachim came to take off a hair by him to come to Chsamsoi Yeshiva. So the one bacha said, you know what, told his friend, you go first because you're better than I, and if he doesn't take you, he's not going to take me. I'm not going to go for the hair. The other bacha went, and Chasam Seifa said, the yeshiva is not for you. So the other bacha started walking out. So Chasam Seifa said, why you walk out? Let me give it for hair. And he took him. That bacha happened to be the Chasam Seifa's great Talmud, the Shmuel Kaselisha. But the Maisa, the bacha said, Rebbe, how can you take me and not him? He's better than I am. He goes, you're right, he's very good. But when he came into my office to put for hair, he walked through the backyard and he stepped on schach. Does he have to sukkahs? So a bacha that steps on schach that has no place in my yeshiva. Hey, think about la halacha, what's wrong? It's only asab ano 7 days, and this is after sukkahs, and you don't put the schach and shemis. You know, but lamaisa the Yiddish Haris versteht that sukkah Hashem there's a certain kedusha. Definitely during sukkahs to make a bezoyin for the sukkah is what the Gemara is concerned about. So Rashi is telling us to keep dirty plates in the sukkah is a bezoyin. Tosfos says a different shot, and that is not mani michal is not plates but pots. Zok Tosfos time. What's wrong with keeping pots in the sukkah? The ka'in teduru beina bahani ein regian lias bebayis dira. So Tosfos is saying it's not the plates that's the problem; it's the pots. So we see two pshatim and rishonim. Either plates that are used or pots. The question is, how do we apply this lamaisa? Let me explain. What does it mean pots are us in the sukkah? Is it only a dirty pot? Then it's not a chiddush. Because a dirty pot is more of a bezayin than plates. In fact, the dirty pot is muktzah on Shabbos. In fact, some say a dirty pot is not muktzah because, it is muktzah, but you're allowed to move it because it's graf shari. So, Shaneimal is it bezoyin. So what's Tosfos adding? It's more likely that Tosfos is adding a pot even with food in it, which is not at all muktzah, and is not bezoyin, but a pot does not belong in the sukkah. You don't bring a pot to your dining room table generally. Don't bring the pot to the sukkah. So Tosfos is saying a much bigger chiddush than Rashi. Of course plates are awesome, but even a pot with food in it does not belong in the sukkah. So this is, again, a big discussion in the Paiskim, but the Shulchan Aruch in Tov Reish Lamed Tes Sif Aleph paskins like both. And the Mechaber says, Kedei Reis Uka Arais Chutz L'Sukkah. Plates don't belong there, and pots don't belong there. Zok de Magen Avram, as Machta Shekel explains, there are people that are very makbid. They don't bring pots in the sukkah at all. In other words, ka'in teduru. But they do keep dirty plates in the sukkah. Zokti Magaram ve'einay nachen. It's wrong. Why? As the Machzah Shekel explains the Magen Avram, because the right approach is both shitas are correct. Pots don't belong in the sukkah even if there's food in it. That's the minig. That's a sensitivity, but it's ka'in teduru. And plates, when they're dirty, are miyus. You have to realize that it's not just a different terminology. Bezoyin sukkah is an issa deraisa, presumably. Ka'in teduru is based on a pasuk, but I can't say it's a deraisa, and also ka'in teduru is very subjective. If, let's say, in my house I do bring pots, so you can't say it's also to bring pots in the sukkah. Ka'in teduru is sort of subjective, Bezoyin is objective. So this is what the Mishnah Berurah passed in Sif Cotton Hay. He says that we don't bring pots at all. That's the minig. And dirty plates also we don't bring. Mishnah Berurah says unless someone is so poor that he has to eat out of the pot that he cooks in, he can bring it in the sukkah like the Chayodim says. So I want to make a point that Lamaisa, there are shittas that the only issa is pots. Ka'in teduru. Dirty plates are fine. I mean, are fine, but there's no issa. The Yakov is Sif Cotton Yud Aleph, and the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan in Sif Beis records these shittas, but the Aruch HaShulchan rejects it. And it's the minig is to honor both opinions. Pots don't belong in the sukkah at all, even with food, and plates not after they're used. So again, if someone keeps dirty plates in the sukkah, you can't yell at him because there are such shittas that are makel, but we are chosh like both shittas. Now let's go a little further. Exactly when do you have to remove the plates from the sukkah? So of course, when you finish, so you're not using the plate, but then again, it doesn't seem to be the right way to do things. Everybody has to get up and bring out the plate when they finish. That's not ka'in teduru, it's not a bezoyin. So it would make sense, if the yisoid is bezoyin, let's do it in a way it's not bezoyin. So I saw the Chutshani, that's in this Karels in Amud Reish Lamed Ches. He says when you finish eating, you don't have to jump up and take the plate out. That would make the whole Suda like one big chaos. But at the end of the course, you finish the fish, you collect the plates like typically we do, bring out the soup. But you don't have to bring it out as soon as you finish. The split second is like Bal Yirah, Bal Yamotza. When you finish the course, clean up the table. The Chiddush, what to me was a big Chiddush, the Meiri, one of the Rishonim, in Daf Chav Tes, learning Rashi, he says, you don't have to remove the plates until you finish the Suda, because now you're going to go to sleep, or you're going to relax, or you're going to learn. And it's most to sleep or learn in a place that there are dirty plates. So the Meiri has an extreme kula in this sugya, that the miyas is not this dirty plate on the table. When you're eating, you're allowed to have dirty plates on the table. The problem is when you're about to do a different activity, sleeping or learning, so then it's inappropriate to have dirty plates when you're eating, when you're sleeping or learning, which is a tremendous kula. It's only when you finish the Suda. But as we said, I don't know, maybe in his times that was done, but today, the normal way of doing things, you collect the plates after every course, that I saw Rabbi Shlomo Zalman also in the Chishloim Perek Zayin Har 88. He does say, Hakol Hoylach Achar Regilus. Doesn't have to be miyad. As soon as you finish the fish, run out with the plate. The entire family finish the course, bring out the plates then. Of course, not to rush a guest. So you might want doubles. He said, let me take your plate. He was hoping you'd give him doubles, take his plate. That's not achnas's archim. So a little bit seichel, and we could go with that shita. Maybe the Miri's times things were different, but today this is ka'in teduru, and this would be the bezoyin after the course. The next course shouldn't have the plates from the previous course. Which pots don't belong in the sukkah? So this is, we saw really pashtus. Of course, a dirty pot has no makom in the sukkah. That's much more miyas. But it seems almost pashit that what Tosfos meant, the chiddush is even a pot with food. So this is easier said than done, because if you have a sukkah right off your house, it's fine. What about people that live in apartment buildings, or they live in a sukkah in the second floor and they go to the sukkah in the ground level in the backyard? You'll put the soup onto plates and bring it into the sukkah. By the time you get to the soup is cold. So the best eitzah is take the pot from the oven, from the gas range, bring it right to the outside of the sukkah, have a table outside, and serve from there. So this way you have hot soup and you don't bring the pot in the sukkah. I did see Rav Chatzkala, Rotzachainu Levrachi, in the Emek Tshuva, Chelik Vav, Reish Chaf. He was talking about in Williamsburg in the projects, the apartment buildings, and it was very, there were families that ate multitude of families ate in one sukkah. I still remember this. So you can't just do that. Everybody's going to bring a pot and put it outside. It's bedlam. He says if there's no choice, so you put the pot on your table. What could you do? He says he brings up a makar. Maybe you have one area. But, again, it's all about ein donen efshe mishi'i efshe. Chayodim was matter to bring a pot into the sukkah and eat out of the pot if you have no other choice. So again, a situation that there's mamish no other choice, and it's not a bezoyin, it's not a lack of teduru. So again, a bisla seichel af habanaychit to use seichel, apply the halacha at the best way possible. Someone asked me, is it an eitzah? He doesn't want to get up and work so hard. He has a box and he puts all the dirty dishes in the dirty pots in the box and he covers it. So the truth is, in Svara, that's not really a heta because ka'in taduru. You don't do it on your dining room. Why are you doing it in the sukkah? It's a lack of cover of the sukkah. What I told him is, if you're in a situation you have no other choice, like an apartment building or you live upstairs and it's no other eitzah, so besides you can be saimach on efsha, that's when a box is a good idea. That makes a little less of a bezoyin. Put all the dishes, if you can't bring it up, for whatever reason you can't bring it out, at least put it in a box, but a box in itself is definitely not a heta. A serving bowl, a serving platter, someone asked me, what halacha does that have? So pashut, it's not like a pot. You're allowed to bring a serving bowl to the table, obviously, but as soon as it's finished, and you finish that course, it's not better than a regular plate after the course is finished. So you remove the plates and the serving platter bowl, that's no longer needed. The Ben Ish Chai in Shlach Ois Chof has interesting minig, by some Sfarim still do this, that they keep the plates with the bones on the table until after benching. That's part of the school of benching. No, so I saw the Sfarim Shapais can say, if that's the way they live a whole year, so that's ka'in taduru. So that's pashut l'chayr. Now, another point I saw, the Shmir Shabbos in Yud Beis Kuf Gimel points out, when we finish our students on a regular Shabbos in the house, you don't clean up until Matzoi Shabbos, till after Havdalah, al Sachana. But when you finish our students in the Sukkah, you're allowed to clean up right away because of the issa of keeping dishes in the Sukkah shloi l'tzayrich. And that sounds very convincing. The only thing is, what about ka'in taduru? If a whole year Matzah Shudas, I keep it in my dining room, why can't I do it on Sukkah also? Teretz is budget. I only do it because I have no other choice. Here I have a choice. The heta allows me to take it out, else the cover of the Sukkah. What's pashut, but something you have to mention pashut the things also, in a public Sukkah, in a shul, in a beis medrash, a person should have the seichel to clean up. I wonder, people come and they leave the stuff there. They leave their dirty cups, their dirty cans, or whatever. Why the guy's coming later today? Even at your own house you can't do that. And kolshke, when it's ben ad mechaveri also, you're leaving your place dirty. So you can't rely on the guy. It's no heta, it's ben ad mechaveri, ben ad malamokim. So basically, in a public place, they give you the service of eating there. Reciprocate with their cheretz and clean up after yourself. Cups, the Gemara is mate beferish, mani shtia is mut in the sukkah. Now there are two svaras why cups are different. So Rashi says because it's not miyus, clean cup, dirty cup, there's not much of a difference. And the other Rishonim say ein kval l'shtia. A person's never finished drinking. So if he's not finished, it's holding by the same course. I'll give you a dugma. The Mishtan Shabbos, you're not allowed to wash dishes on Shabbos. But cups you're allowed to wash because ain't kval l'shtia. So I guess in Hilchas Sook it's a kula also that you don't have to remove the cups right away. I did see Rabbi Yosef Liebman is Chuvas Mishnas Yosef Chelik Zayin Kuf Yud Ches. He has an interesting chiddush. He says, but today's styrofoam cups, where after one use they're no longer reusable, that might be like a klicheres that's a bezoyin where you are. I don't know what he means. I would use my cup again, maybe someone else, but he's a little more concerned about a styrofoam cup that's not usable, not reusable. Maybe that would be like a plate that is already a bezoyin. But again, if you're going to use it again, you might use it again. The same het applies. But what I think is a point to mention, again, we're so careful about sukkah, it's kedai to mention to leave a cup after you have a coffee in beis medrash should be unthinkable. The beis medrash is the beis Hashem, even if it's not chav lachem, which often it is, but stam, we have to know this is the Bernstein home. You drink a cup in the coffee, there's a heta, it's not posh, but there's a heta, but to go beyond that and leave the beis medrash that's not clean is definitely not the right thing. People typically bring a box of items to the sukkah, which is okay, they have the tablecloths, but to leave an empty box in the sukkah lacks in ka'in taduru. We don't do it in our dining room. So you bring a box of things that you need, empty it, and remove the box as soon as possible. An empty soda, empty juice containers, it's a cover of the sukkah. It basically sends us a message that I'm in the beis Hashem, I'm a place where the Oshpizin are here, and I'm going to treat the sukkah properly. And now we come to the last part of this sugya, and that is where the sugya takes sort of an interesting turn. The halacha is that we sit in the sukkah 7 days, or in Chutz La'aretz Shmini Atzeres also, But beyond that, we don't sit in the sukkah. Now, Lamaisa, some people found it comfortable to sit in the sukkah on Simchas Torah. And the question is there a problem of Bal Tosef? I was once glad at someone's house, Simchas Torah Sudi had in the sukkah. It was a warm day, very comfortable. So the problem is Bal Tosef. So this is a Gemara later, and Daf Mem Ches, and the Gemara says you can't sit in the sukkah when it's sort of this man mitzvah, because Bal Tosef. But there's an eitzah. Bring out the plates and bring out the pots, whatever shot you want to learn. Bring out the plates and leave them in the sukkah. The Amarava Mani Michla Bami Mitalalta. You hear a cheshbon? If you have plates and pots and you keep them in the sukkah, so many Rishonim, the Rif and the Bahag use a lashon. So right now your sukkah is pasul. If it's pasul, there's no Bal Tosef. So a whole sukkah is mitzvah to keep a pot or plate in the sukkah. But Simchas Torah, you want to eat in the sukkah, gesundheit. Keep the pot there, put the pot there, leave the plates there. And the Rif and the Bahag use a lashon, now it's pasul. If it's pasul, there's no Bal Tosef. Okay, the Maisa, this has bearing on our sugya also, because it's not just for the 9th day. That would mean that if the first day you bring your pot or your plate in the sukkah in a time when it doesn't belong there, that would make the sukkah pasul. Now, other Rishonim say when the Rif and the Bahag use a lashon of pasul, it doesn't mean it's pasul b'diavad. It means does not resemble a sukkah that would be a concern about Tosef, but it's not pasul. Okay, so the kula is that if there's plates or pots in sukkah, it's not pasul. But one thing I will say, the Chayyad Mekuf Mem Zayin Beis says, if you have plates or pots in the sukkah any of the 7 days, it might not be possible, don't make a bracha on that sukkah. Because like some time it's pasul. Again, I'm talking about the first 7 days, sukkah that has plates or pots doesn't belong there, the sukkah is pasul. So we don't say it's pasul mamish, but it's definitely not a sukkah enough to make a bracha on it. And the Mishtabur in Sivkot and Tezayin, in Sivkot and Vav, the Kafachayim in Sivkot and Tezayin, quote this Chayyodam lahalacha. So we see how inappropriate it is to have plates or pots in the sukkah. But we also see what Bizayin does to a sukkah. It jeopardizes the very kashrut of the sukkah, and maybe even the opportunity to make a bracha. Comes again one of the Gedolei Rishonim, the Orchos Chaim, Hilchos Sukkah, Simul Amud. He says we're very makpid not to do any dvar mishal Bizayin, kagoin shtifas kederos ukaaros uchayoytze bizu. We don't do anything that's inappropriate in the sukkah, like washing plates and pots. Shlayim mitzvahs bezuyis olav. We don't want to be mavaz of the sukkah. Incidentally, you notice he gives 2 examples. Don't wash plates or pots in the sukkah. Why did he say washing cups? Because cups is mutter to wash in the sukkah. You're allowed to keep them there, you're allowed to wash them there. So plates and pots don't wash in the sukkah. And the Ramah quotes this in the end of Sif Aleph. Al yasa shum tashmiz bazi besukkah shekadesh leyemitzes bezuyis alav. Don't do anything bezoyin dik in the sukkah. Zok the Bach and the Goyin. The makar of this whole chiddush is our Gemara. Which Gemara? Pots and plates in the sukkah. Since we see midina Gemara, you can't keep pots or plates in the sukkah, and some say it's even possible. We see how careful you have to be that the sukkah should not be subject to bezoyin. The Lev Chaim Faladia Chele Gimel Kuf Mem gives an example not to hang laundry to dry in a sukkah. It's just not the place for a sukkah, for laundry in a sukkah. So here we have, it's lav dafka plates and pots. That's just an avua in the kula, that's just an example. But any tashmish of bizoyin is wrong in the sukkah. Now let me ask you a few questions that I've heard over the years. Someone has a heta to do work on Chalamayit. He does some paperwork, I think he was an accountant, I don't remember what it was, but he's allowed to work in Chalamayit. He had a rab that told me he's mutter. Should he do his paperwork in the sukkah? Is that appropriate? Someone asked me once, he goes on a treadmill a half hour every day. Should he bring it out to the sukkah? There's no problem, but does it belong there or not? How do you qualify the concept of bezoyin? So I didn't find hilchos, treadmill in Shulchan Aruch, but I'll tell you what I found. Hopefully we could extrapolate from beyond. The Merivayah that I mentioned earlier, very short, kedarke, but he says you're supposed to learn the sukkah, v'chein schoik. You're supposed to play. Okay. Doesn't say what he means, but the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah and Darkei Moshe in Sivkot and Aleph, says, Kasm Rivayel HaRoitz L'Sachek B'Kuvya Yischek B'Sukkah. Now, everybody wonders, wow, Sachek B'Kuvya is, that's something that's Pasol Eidos, that's dice. But the Ramah explained the Marivayel, you want to play with dice, Pasol Eidos, so you want to do it in the Sukkah. Now, I'm not saying you should play with dice in the Sukkah, but what the point is, the attitude is, listen, Sukkah is a time, like every Yom Tov, to connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Especially, don't forget, if it's Sukkah now, that means Hoshana Rabbah, the Gemar Chitum, is not far away. We have to be at our best on Sukkahs. We're not supposed to be playing dice or cards or anything on Chol Hamoed, or Yom Tov for that matter. But if you feel you have to do it, ka'in teduru. That's your ka'in teduru. You're an interesting fellow, but do it in the Sukkah. So we see, again, if you don't think it's right, don't do it. But if you're doing it, as long as it's not osam mamish, do it in the Sukkah. I saw many dairas later, the Sambas Chaim and Reish Nun Hey was asked if a playing klofim, I don't want to touch that, but we learned all about cards, curtain. If you're doing that, could you play in the Sukkah? So he says, of course, you have to be careful with Kedusha Sukkah, but if Lamais you are playing it, that's not the question. Where? Do it in the Sukkah. So it seems to me that the attitude is try to do things right, but if you're doing it, the place to do it is the Sukkah. Someone just told me that an Adam Gadol that I know, he saw his children watching a video. Now, Erlicha children, and he was certain that they watch either a Shir or maybe a Siyam Hashazah. He says, I'm sure you're watching something appropriate. Why don't you do it in the Sukkah? So he said it was an interesting lesson that, again, if it belongs in the Migdash Ma'at, it belongs in the Sukkah. So that's why, the fact that the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Mitayel b'Sukkah, Tiyol does not mean going for a stroll. Tiyol means relaxation, recreation. So that's why if you feel that you want to do it, and you think it's right, even if it's not a mitzvah, it belongs in the Sukkah. That's why the Pais can say without a doubt, if you have a guest, and you're not going to talk and learning, you're going to just shmooze, bring him out to the Sukkah. Of course, the Mishnah writes, if Cotton Beis, or Pam wrote this with his Ksav Yad Kach, he put it on his Sukkah, he wrote it out, that because Kedusha Sukkah is Gedoyel Ma'oid, it's right in Mayid and Divrei Chayil, and to keep it B'Kedusha, so Avad Sukkah should be a place of Torah and mitzvahs, but if you have to shmooze, you shmooze in the Sukkah. Lashon Hara is Mu'asa in house and Sukkah. I should mention the Goyen pointed out that the oisias of Sukkah, the Samach comes from the Shinayim, from the teeth, Vav is from the Safsayim, from the lips, Chaf is from the Cheich, and Hey is from the Gorain. None of the letters of Sukkah come from the tongue. All 4 letters of Sukkah are the Shmira on the tongue. Because Sukkah is supposed to bring a Shmira on Lashon Hara, and Anas Devarim, and Dibur Ma'asurim. So the Sukkah is the greatest stira to Devar Masurim. But shmoozing, if you have to shmooze, you shmooze in the Sukkah. Now I want to make another point. This is the Matafraim of the Kadosh Elya in Kayudua. In Tafresh Chafeis Yivkot in Sambachei, he writes that Anshi Maisim Medagtikim, they didn't talk any Sichas Chul in the Sukkah whatsoever, but that's only when the family were on the same level. If you're going to come to the Sukkah on Sukkahs, and you're not going to talk a word because you can't talk Sichas Chulin, so you're sitting like an Ovel Bein HaMesamchim, and your family is Pelahem V'lo Yadaber. He writes very sarcastically. And what should they do? For 7 days you're going to have a Tainis Dibur in your Sukkah. So you have to know there's also Ben Adam Chaveroi and Chesed B'Diba is appropriate in the Sukkah. So you have to have a little Seichel also. But he says, don't forget there has to be a Mitzvah Simchas Yom Tov that you have to provide for your wife and children. So, like everything else in this world, you have to use seichel, but the sukkah, if you have to shmooze, the shmoozing in the sukkah. Someone asked me an interesting question, I quote, could I read a kosher newspaper in the sukkah? So, whatever that means. But obviously, a non-kosher newspaper doesn't belong in our house either, but something that you're allowed to read. So, it's the same thing. If it belongs in a Migdash Ma'at, it could belong in the sukkah. Now, Grada the Stipel and Archas Rabbeinu Beis, Reish Chavdal, he didn't allow any newspapers in his sukkah. That was l'roiv kedushasei. A treadmill, same thing. Treadmill, if that's his form of teal, and why not do it in the sukkah? Especially if you listen to a shir as he's on the treadmill. So that doesn't seem to be a problem. What's a little more of an issue is bookkeeping, writing, malacha on Chalamoid in the Sukkah. So the emes we could say if it's mutter, so he's mutter. So maybe it's tell you a little bit if malach on Chalamoid is hutra or hutcha. But again, it's more likely to say if it's mutter to do it, and he has to do it, so it belongs in the Sukkah. That's not different than teal. The Chashuke Chemed, on our Gemara in Sukkah, he says, binding svarim should not be done in the Sukkah. Maybe that's the pshat because you don't bind in your dining room. But regular paper you could do on your dining room table, it wouldn't be a stira to ka'in teduru. Someone asked he wants to grill in his Sukkah. No, grill, I mean, if madach pots don't belong in the Sukkah, grilling is very good, but not in the Sukkah. Now, to keep a urn with water in the Sukkah, that's appropriate. Maybe even a toaster oven, a little more of a modified type of behavior, but the grill in the Sukkah does not belong in the Sukkah. Do it outside, not in the Sukkah. There's the River Ephraim, Mechelik Zayin, Kufay and Beis. He says the stipler wants to sandik by a bris in the Sukkah, and the male is about to diaper the child. The diaper says, no, you don't diaper a child in the Sukkah. Take him out. Very understandable, because, the Sukkah is not a place to diaper a child. I saw a dava nifla ma'oid in the Sefer, the Tshuvas Lechem Shleima, Archaim Kufyud Beis. It's a whole tumult, which is not negay Baruch any longer, but it used to be a shaila, especially when they didn't have bathrooms close by, about urinating in the Sukkah. So many places came acid, there's some that were mako, but I'm not getting into that point. But what he says is, how could you say it's asa? I mean, a person could be matal meraglayim with tefillin on. So how could it be asa in the Sukkah? So he says, when you're in the Sukkah, he says, the halal Sukkah and the avi is a chayfetz mitzvah. And it's more chomer than with tefillin on. The point is the Sukkah is the embassy of the Shekhinah. It's the tzeil of Emenusa. So in a certain sense, it's more chomer than with tefillin. So diapering a child should not be done in the Sukkah. Parking a bike in the Sukkah. Again, find a better garage, not the Sukkah. The place can discuss, you could lean the bike on the wall of the Sukkah, on the outside of the wall. Maybe it's also b'hanah. So that you could discuss a little bit. But basically, it has to have the right attitude when you're treating the Sukkah. Someone asked me, could he stack his mattresses in the Sukkah? So I said, why not? Well, I don't do it in my dining room. I said, you're making a mistake. Because the Sukkah now is your bedroom. And you're allowed to keep the bed and the mattress. That's part of its use. So it's a dining room and a bedroom. But something that doesn't belong there, I told them the dirty laundry that the children leave the socks lying around. If dirty plates are also, dirty laundry is certainly also. The Aruch HaShulchan, in fact, says shoes should not be brought into the Sukkah. So Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky in the Seif explains, because in those days they lived outdoors, basically, they didn't have paved roads, and the shoes were sort of like boots that were dirty. So today you could keep shoes in the Sukkah, but it has to have with the cheshbon. A garbage can does not belong in the Sukkah. Just like you don't keep in your dining room. Now, I want maybe in a community, a shul Sukkah, if you don't keep really it doesn't belong in a shul Sukkah either. But if you don't keep it there, people can leave it on the table. Maybe there's no other choice. But basically, the Sukkah has to have that kedusha. The Paiskim clear if you're allowed to wash negavasa in the Sukkah. The Chashulchan says you have no choice because you can't walk Dalar Amos without negavasa. So negavasa we wash in the Sukkah, but of course you remove it right away. The Chashulchan says, but netilas yadayim for bread you can't do in the Sukkah. We don't do it in the dining room. But the emphasis today, people have installed sinks in the dining room to be more taken from the Tila Bracha. And the minig is, if you have an older person that can't walk up to wash, bring out them. It's a mitzvah kibbutz. But the attitude is, make sure the thing belongs in the Sukkah. An interesting question, which today we have, it's almost unavoidable, and that is to make the Sukkah a shortcut. When I was growing up, this wasn't a geya, but today you walk on the streets, you have to walk through Sukkahs. What's the shayla? So we know the sugya in Kuf Nun Aleph, it's a Gemara Megillah. You can't make a beis medrash into a shortcut. I can't walk through this door and go out that door to save a block. So what am you walking on? I would say most blocks in Borough Park, there's sukkahs all over the place. So all the Heintige Paiskim discusses, and basically what they all say is there's a Beferisha Sefer Meah Sha'arim that says there's no Issa of Kapanjir by a sukkah. It's a nice Zehirus, but there's no such Issa. Now what I always did before I saw this inside, I dafka walk through the sukkah because I have kavanah l'shem mitzvah. When you walk in a sukkah, if you're not making a bracha on it, that's true, I'm not eating, but I'm being in the sukkah. Now I do know the Sharat Tzion in Sifkat and Tzad Gimel says that if a person walks in the sukkah just to collect payment, and he just misasik ba'alma, there's no mitzvah. That's because he's not mechav l'shem mitzvah. But if you walk through the sukkah to get a mitzvah to be in the sukkah another 4 seconds, why not? Forget, I walk through the sukkah instead of walking around. I go through a sukkah and get a mitzvah. So I can't believe that would be an issa if it seems to me more like a ma'isa mitzvah. I did see in Rafelda, Zangaz from Lakewood, in a sefer, he points out that the Mechaben Kufn Aleph Sif Hey says, if you were first, for years you've been going this way, and then someone built the base medrash, and he deprived you of your kapangia, you're allowed to go through the kapangia, because your kapangia was before the shul. So he applies this to what's almost unavoidable. Many people build their sukkah on the front or back porch. To get into your house, you have to go through the sukkah. So if it's going to be also, you can't go into your house. The teretz is my passageway was before the sukkah. So a very nice chap based on that halacha. Someone asked me a very challenging question. He has an elderly parent that have a full-time non-Jewish aide. And he heard this episode of having a guy enter the sukkah. So let me clarify this. It's not in Shulchan Aruch or earlier Poskim. It's the Shach ala Torah, quoted by the Kaf HaChaim, the Lashon and Kaf HaChaim Sivkot and Vav, that a sukkah is the tzeil d'mei menusa, and a guy has no place in our tzeil d'mei menusa. And he says that the Ushpizin give klolos, nimrotzai, so those that bring a guy into the sukkah. Okay, avad it's inappropriate. But again, the main avla seems to be, it's a bezoyin sukkah, you're making a social and out of the sukkah, you're inviting the guy into your sukkah. But if the guy is there to help the yeshiva sukkah, a person needs an aid, some people have goyish maids cleaning up. I had a shiloh when someone had to call the guy a mir la'akum, I had to mir la'akum. What should he do? The guy can't come into the sukkah. How's he going to fix the schach or fix the light? What, remote control? Fix the schach? So if you have no choice, if that's a tzarech ha-mitzvah, it's not a stira. The main thing is the sensitivity that this is a mokum kadosh and it's only for Yidden that appreciate it. A really geshmak shayla today, it's almost in every sukkah, and that some sukkahs, a lot of sukkahs I should say, have part of it that's not really kosher. The mashal. If you have it on a porch, so typically there's an overhang of a roof that's over part of the sukkah. But it doesn't pass with the sukkah, because whatever's under the overhang, you don't sit there. But the wall of the house you use for your sukkah, that's doifin akum. In other words, the sukkah is kosher as it is, but there's one area, even if it's a pretty significant area, you don't sit under it. So the question has been asked more than once, can I keep pots or dishes or whatever doesn't belong in the sukkah in that pasula area? It's in the sukkah, it's part of the sukkah, but it's not really kosher a sukkah. The same shaila could be asked, if I put noy sukkah on that wall, does it have a kedushas noy sukkah? Is it also no? Maybe it's not kosher. So the Kurayan gives it cut and Yud says it depends. If you have 3 walls without that wall that's problematic, then you can do what you want to that area. But if you only have, with that is the 3rd wall that's machshir the sukkah, then you have to treat that area as the regular sukkah, and noi sukkah taka is noi, and you can't keep anything inappropriate in that area. Now, to make a long story short, there are poskim that say it doesn't make a difference if you have 2 or 3 or 4 walls. Lamaisa, that area is not part of the sukkah. So who cares if you need that wall? The wall is a lamdish wall, but that area is possible. Look, there's no schach on top of it. And some poskim take the opposite attitude. It's the perception of it. You look at the sukkah, that's part of the sukkah. No one knows, looks up, this is sukkah. So I would say that it's not kedai to be makel, unless you have a reason, and anyhow, a sniff, l'mashal, let's say you have the issue with plates or pots. This is an additional area, that's the better place to keep it. Someone asked about the right place to light neiros on Yom Tov or Shabbos of Sukkah. It's an excellent question. The Gemara says the menorah, the lights, do not belong in the sukkah. There are 5 reasons that you can't light neiros in the sukkah. But what's an ikka for us, one of the reasons is the sakana involved. Leaving candles, having candles in a sukkah is a great danger, especially if the bnei bayis go to sleep and the kids are running around, the grandchildren, chas v'chilul Hashem yirachem. So, b'derech klal, we don't light neiros, at least when people are not there in the sukkah. If you light it by the sukkah, then you watch carefully, fine. But if a person is afraid to light in the sukkah, you light in the kitchen where the bnei bayis could have enough from the neiros when they prepare the suda. And I guess Achrein Chaviv, most important of Ka'in Taduru, the Sharvaida, writes in a sefer that a person should try to stay in the sukkah as long as possible. And if he leaves for no reason, he's oiva, he's mavantal, the heilige mitzvah of sukkah. And all the later poskim wonder, why? The whole mitzvah is Ka'in Taduru. to live in the Sukkah at my house. I'm not under house arrest. Sukkah is not a jail. Why should I say if I leave the Sukkah, I'm over? I lost the mitzvah, I'm over. So Rabbi Zalman in the Sefer HaSukkah says a beautiful pshat. If I would approach you and say, I'm going to pay you $500 an hour, I want to make a psychological study, I want to observe people, and I want you to be my subject. Sit on the dining room table and just don't do anything. Just stay here and I'm going to watch you, I'm going to take notes. $500 an hour. Okay? Would you do it? Yeah. Now let's say your sons, let's play basketball now. You say, not today. Not $500 an hour basketball game. No, I'm staying here. And your wife, let's go shopping. Oh, not today. I want to stay here. So when a person sees Kedushas HaSukkah, Ka'in Taduru requires him to make a cheshbon. Would you leave the house if you lose $500 an hour? Don't lose the Sukkah. Although we don't paskin like this, because at the end of the day you're allowed to leave the Sukkah for recreation, but at least it's an attitude to take to cherish the mitzvah of Sukkah. So that's most of all, well, it's almost Erev Yom Tiv. Let's appreciate the Sukkah. Tak v'zayich to a simchas Yom Tiv. Lanu l'chal Yisrael. Amen v'amen.
Shame Egenship, I'd like to give a big yashar koyach to Smith for today's share. To have the great schools to sponsor a share called Egenship Torah 718-851-8651 or 718-853-3950 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Chag Sameach. Everyone after Mincha Smith will say a short sikkim of today's share. Bananya ben Akash, Emerald Sagarish Baruch Lazakis, is the figure here on Terra Mitzvah and Emal and Yakov, and on Sitka Yagdol Terra V'Yadeh.